everybody, JC here. Oh my goodness. I have a guest for you with me today. I can't talk. So I want to just dive in. But first, let me say welcome to Rebel Soul Fuckery. It is exciting to be here. This brand new beginning to this brand new year. We have the rebrand of the podcast. So freaking cool. We're going to have all kinds of cool stuff to talk about. And if you don't know me really quickly, I am JC Cormack, obviously your founder and the host of the Rebel Soul Fuckery podcast. And I work with ambitious people who are so ready to reignite that inner rebel fire, right? So that you can live a soul-driven life and be super excited about life and work and want to get out of bed the next morning. And you're like, I'm ready to go and start the day. But today I have an amazing guest. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then we're going to dive into a really cool conversation. So Sabine, will you tell everyone who you are and what the heck it is you do?
Okay. Yes, of course. My name is Sabine Schopke, and I'm the founder of the Power Life Coach. And I am a retired serial entrepreneur. I've had multiple businesses throughout my life that I started and sold. And I decided to retire last year from that. And now I am out there sharing my lived wisdom with people who want to feel like I feel, who want to have an amazing midlife and the rest of their life, so the second half of their life, and who also still do want to make money and live their purpose. So have an aligned life that is
Yes.
successful on their terms, really.
So you guys can see why Sabine's on the show because it makes total sense, right? We're quite similar in our passion for helping other people, really,
Yes.
right? So you and I connected via LinkedIn. Um, things that had stood out to me is I could feel that rebel energy from you. And just like, bam, you could really feel it and see it. And then we started communicating, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is really great, right? So I want to talk a little bit about that as well. It's like how you yourself as a rebel, and how does that work into how you're helping people now?
So I've always done things differently. I left home and moved continents when I was 17 and went to school learning a new language. And by the time I was 20, I want to say, um, I was actually homeless in Toronto and I started my first company. And I always say I started my first company on a park bench in Toronto, which is absolutely true. And I went from
Let's just
there.
highlight that for a minute. If anyone didn't hear that, she just shared with you that she started her first company from a park bench in Toronto. So no one has any freaking excuses. It's my point.
I think that's pretty badass revelry. Like now that I
Yeah.
look back and I have my own kids, they're now almost 21, but when I looked at them when they were 17, I was like, that was me. How
Yeah.
crazy
Mhm.
is that? And it wasn't just some little like a local little company, it was a major like international exporting company that I started from a park bench. And yeah, so that was pretty decisive. It kind of put
Mhm.
my life on that path. And then I started to take care of myself financially and I put myself through school. I always had this dream going to Harvard, which I was in Canada, so I ended up going to a Harvard affiliate in Canada. But then I graduated from university, and at that point, my company was doing so well that I was like, this was nice, but I don't think I want a job.
Yeah.
So I instead expanded the company into the US, and that's how I ended up in the US in 96 in California and went from there and then expanded the company and then started new companies, sold companies. And I had twins. Um, Again, like they're almost 21 now. But even back then, I was told I could never have children. And I no, I didn't take no for an answer. Like I
Mhm.
never took no for an answer. And I did my own, I always did it my own way. And at the end, I always got to where I wanted to go, one way or
Yeah.
another. So,
So it makes me think of going into high school, or excuse me, going into my senior year in high school. And I was an honor student and, all the things, cheerleader, checked all the boxes in high school, right? But when they sit you down with a guidance counselor and go, hey, what do you want to focus on for your classes for your last year of school? And what are your, college aspirations? What are your dreams? Whatever. And I had some thoughts. I wanted to do psychology. I was interested in that. And then I also wanted to, I had for years since I was a little girl, wanted to have my own dance studio because I was a dancer and a gymnast. And my guidance counselor looked at me. Of course, this was the 80s, right? Because I'm in my
Yeah.
50s. And he was like, you should just be a secretary. Well, a year later, I had students in my parents' side yard. And a year after that, I built a studio. So my point is, though, tell these inspiring stories, but I want to hear from you, Sabine, when you're hanging out on the park bench, how do you find it within yourself to one, figure out what it is you could do, and then to have the gumption to do it? Can we talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, of course. Um, I think the really, really big thing was that there was never a doubt in my mind that this would just work. Because now, like now looking back in the last few years, looking back, I kept thinking, wow, this could have really worked out differently. And then what?
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have had no money to go back to school the next year. And what the heck would I have done? But that never crossed my mind. It was like, no, I'm going to do this now. That's what I'm going to do. And I figured it out. I think, and I think that's what differentiates like personalities and how
Mm-hmm.
people tackle situations is that like I in my entire life I don't overthink things. Like I don't think, oh my God, I need to have all the answers. I just know this is what I want to do. Okay, let's start and figure
Yeah.
it out as I'm going along. Like you take one step and then the next different choices present
Mm-hmm.
themselves and you take the next one. And that doesn't mean like I made a ton of mistakes, I'm sure, and maybe things could have been done more elegantly or differently. But at
Yeah.
the end, I got to where I wanted to go. And we all do. And sometimes we get to places like we think we know where we want to go. And then like life has something else in store for us, which might even be better, right?
Yeah.
So we'll find our way without being too hung up about knowing, about, making all these plans, having all these answers about like the specifics of it. Just, I think what I always followed was that feeling of how I wanted to feel.
Mm-hmm.
And for me at the time, I was like, I want to feel like financially free, that
Mm-hmm.
I can like live the way I want to live. But I had no idea what that really looked like. But I always followed a feeling and I didn't overthink it. I always figured things out as I was doing them. And
Yes, it's the concept of jumping. And who is it that says that? She used to be on Shark Tank. I can't think of her name. Oh, I can almost say her name. But anyway, she was the short-haired one. I remember that, but I can't say her name for the life of me. But she used to. I've heard her say, "You jump out of the plane and learn to fly on the way down." And I'm like, "Oh, that's me. That's
totally,
me."
for me, it's
Yeah,
jumping off the pier. Like
yeah, yeah,
you jump off the pier and you figure it out as you hit the water, get in the water, and you will always
yeah.
swim, float, whatever. It's this. So I think that's what, like, the fear didn't hold me back because I didn't overthink it. And I didn't have a
Mhm.
choice. Like, it was like, no, I'm going to do this now. Like, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
So
Now, would you? Because how old were you when that happened? You said
I,
seven.
I think about
No.
20 as I started. I
Okay.
left when I was 17 and then I was in high school. And so about 20.
So I'm curious because
Mhm.
when I started my first company, yeah, I didn't overthink it either. It was just a no brainer. I was like, oh, this will work. I
Yeah.
just knew, like, it wasn't a question. When I've built other businesses over the years, there have been times where, of course, I had children and there were
Right.
different levels of responsibility. But it seemed like I was like, oh, wait a minute. And then my overthinking kicked in some. So I'm curious, what are your thoughts? Because I've thought, gosh, when I was younger, I just, I was braver. Maybe not as wise, and maybe that's why I was braver. So I'm curious, what do you think when you were 20 something? We didn't know what we didn't know. Maybe we didn't know the same levels of failure yet that might happen. Does it make it easier, or do you think it just makes us just like a little wilder and crazier?
No, I think responsibilities do hold us back, like our sense of responsibility for sure. And I think like looking at the last, let's say, 15 years, like the choices I've made, it took me longer to actually jump off that pier because there was things holding back. Even though, yes, but now, actually now where my kids are grown and they're doing their
Mhm.
own thing, I'm back to that 20-year-old. Like that's what it feels
Yeah.
like. And that's why, like last year, I got rid of everything, sold everything, and got on a
Mhm.
plane to Europe. And I was like, okay, I don't know. I don't know if I'll be back. I don't know where I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna go. Like I think that comes back. And I think
Yeah.
that's the really, really amazing thing about midlife that's so dreaded,
Mhm.
that freedom comes back. And I swear, I feel like I'm back there, except today I have the wisdom and I have the financial freedom
Mhm.
that I didn't have back then. So it comes
Yes.
back. But I think there's a time, for sure, those kids, like they're little and you're like, oh
Mhm.
my God, no. Like, what if I
Yeah.
mess up?
Yeah, exactly. I've said that time and again. And as you know, because we were sharing prior to um, recording today, but my youngest, of course, we're recording this in December, but my youngest just left the nest. And so I'm an empty nester. And as long as things go well for him, I think they will. But um, and I'm like, oh, one, it's really painful right now,
Yeah,
and two, I know I'm going to start to feel that sense of freedom again before long. I'm really, once I get used to the new normal, and then I'm like, where will I go? What will I do? And there's also that level of I can just go wild and crazy with rebel soul fuckery and not have that same level of concern. Like, well, if something doesn't work, no big deal because it's just me. And the
right.
things that do work, oh my gosh, how amazing. And I can go travel and speak, or I can go whatever, right? There's all these different pieces that come into play. So when we do have those responsibilities, it's different, but it doesn't
Right.
mean that we still can't be very bold and rebellious because
Right.
I've always been. I'm 53. I've always been, right?
Yeah. There was when I was in Europe in this last year, and one of the trips I took was to Greece. And it was this tiny little cheap airline in Europe, and they don't like they assign seats to you, you don't have a choice. So I went in there and I sat down, and there was this older man sitting next to me, and we started talking really quickly. And it was turned out the most beautiful 3.5 hours of my life. He was a monk and
Oh.
lived in Greece on an island. And we had the deepest, most beautiful
Mm-hmm.
conversation. And the most important part of that conversation was at some point he said to me, he said, "Do you know what's the im most important thing in life?" And of course, I was like, "Love." He was like, "Nice, no, but no." And I guessed a couple of other things. And at the end, he said, "It's the power of choice."
Oh, wow. Mm-hmm.
For us to realize that we have that power because so many people feel like they don't have a choice. Like,
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
despite
Yes.
the responsibilities we have, despite whatever else is going on, but on top of it, we victimize ourselves to the circumstances that we're
Mm-hmm.
in. But he said, if people realize their own power of
Mm-hmm.
choice, life would be different for those people. And I think
Yes.
that's
Yeah.
where a lot of people, like when I made that bold move last year and I said, I'm going to get rid of everything. I sold my company, I get rid of my house, my cars, like everything, narrowed everything down to 2 suitcases my entire life and got on
Yeah.
that plane.
Mm-hmm.
I had so many people tell me, oh my gosh, you're crazy.
Yes.
What are you doing? And
Yeah.
aren't you feeling guilty about your kids? I'm like, my
Mm-hmm.
kids are traveling. Like, why am I sitting
Yeah.
here waiting for them to come home? No,
Right.
and the interesting part was when I came back like 4 months later just to visit for a couple of weeks, and I was like, ta-da! I was so happy. I was blossoming. I looked good.
Mm-hmm.
And they looked at me and they were like, uh, how'd it go? And I said, amazing. It's amazing. And then they said to me, oh wow, I wish I could do what you did.
Oh,
And I was
yeah.
like, aha, all of your judgment,
Mm-hmm.
all of you putting me down and creating these worst case scenarios. Oh my
Yeah.
God, what if it doesn't work? Da, da, da. It's all
Mm-hmm.
out of fear, but all out of
Yes.
like, and a lot of these people I said, you have a choice.
Mhm.
yeah, about this and about that. And like, no, no, there's solutions for all of this.
Yes. And
So,
that we have choices in every single thing we do.
yes,
Even if you're like, well, I can't afford to go blah, blah, blah. One, there's ways around that. Two, you can find and choose to find things in your life every single day that do bring happiness.
yes,
Now, we may be in the middle of the most horrible, seemingly horrible things in our lives, right? There's tragedy, there's a lot, but there's a way to find happiness and playfulness and in everyday life. There absolutely is. It just takes practice for one
right.
thing. And then
It's
it becomes natural, right? It's,
right.
you know,
It's like, so I used to be a professional bodybuilder until last year, and I always compare it to that. It's like a muscle that you
mm-hmm.
can flex and you flex it and it's going to get stronger and becomes part of you. And the whole argument about money is complete
Yeah,
BS
I
because
know.
like when people said to me, "Oh, well, I can't afford what you did." And I said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa." I said, "You can't afford not to do what I did because
Yeah.
my cost of living over in Europe was about an eighth of what it
Yeah,
cost me to be here." So,
that's true.
yeah.
Yeah, that's
So,
totally true. And money is when we focus on things differently and we're focused on the mentality like you and I were talking from the beginning with the first companies that they were going to work. You just knew they were going to work. So that was the energy that we put out. So that's what we attracted. If we focus on, I don't have enough, I can't do this, guess what you get? You don't have enough, you
right,
can't do that.
right.
And so, we can, people can talk law of attraction and of course the secret from years ago, God love them. You can't just sit in your living room and think an elephant's going to show up, but, or whatever that part of the documentary was, but you have to take action, but you do have to really work on the psyche and focus that mindset and the energy and all that stuff that some think is woo woo nonsense, but it's not.
No, it's not because, and that's why, like, when I first got into spirituality about 20 years ago, I fell in love with the science of mind. Because for me, as somebody who's very practical, somebody who's grounded and all of that, it was a really easy way in. And basically, like, when it comes to that, to our energy we put into something, if it's negative, we're like, oh my God, this is never going to work, and I don't have the
Mm-hmm.
money, and I'm not good enough, and all of that, then that's what we put out and really hands-on put out. Like if I hadn't been as convinced about my idea of what I wanted to do and how I wanted to build this company, and when I went to those appointments, I brought nothing else to the table but my energy and my conviction to that company. And
Mm-hmm.
that's why people bought into this. There was one person in particular who I met. I remember I walked through Toronto for hours to get to this appointment because I had no money for even the subway. And I got to that appointment and I sat there and I said, this is what I want to do. And I brought it across that by the end of the meeting, I remember I was sitting there holding my breath and I was like, oh my God, this has to work. I need this guy to fall into place because it was a forwarding company at the airport. And I said, this is what I want to do. But what I need from you is I need 60 days. I need a space in your warehouse. Back then, they didn't have the security at the airport. So I said, I need a space in the warehouse at the airport and you can bill me the month after. And that's it. He didn't know me from Adam. And by
Yeah,
the end of the meeting, he said, you got it. And
that's
years
freaking
later,
awesome.
without him, this would have never worked. And years later, I went to visit him and I said, do you know that you were the key person? Like you changed the trajectory of my life because you made it possible
Mm-hmm.
for this dream. And I said, why did you trust me? Why did you give me
Yeah.
all of it? He said, because you looked like you knew what you were doing and
Yes.
you were
Yeah.
so into this. And
Yeah.
that's the hands-on, like that's not
Yeah.
woo-woo. This is like
No.
you gotta portray that energy, but in order to
Yeah.
do that, you gotta have the conviction. You gotta feel
You
it.
got to believe it. You got to
Yeah,
believe it. You got to feel it because then it comes out. And that is something I so often hear from clients and former students of mine. They're just like you. It's your energy, or people to this day. Just like yesterday, I think it was someone connected with me, and they're like, "I don't know. I just needed to connect with you because you're just so unapologetic and so bold
right,
in what you do." And they don't really even know. They don't really fully understand what it is I do, but they just said, I just needed to connect with you. I'm like, yeah. And that is also intuition. That's that
Yes.
inner knowing. That's that nudge from source, God, universe, whatever, that says, hey. And so even you, Sabine, when we connected, it was an intuitive thing for
Yes.
me. If I remember right, because I've been connected with a number of people lately, but if I remember right, there was something in particular. I don't know if it was some of the numbers that showed up, because I do pay attention to some numerology and things like that. And I said, oh, I got to connect with her because there was just some things that aligned. And then we just hit it off. And
Right.
I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, this is so cool because I paid attention to those signs and that intuition that was coming through, right?
Yes, and that's another thing. I think that it's something that's has gotten lost.
Yes.
And
Mm-hmm.
it's the the faith, the trust into our
Mm-hmm.
intuition. I think we are so programmed today to think a certain way, to believe a certain things, to not tune into that signal that we have. We
Mm-hmm.
have the most powerful, beautiful signal inside of us. And that's honestly why I needed to go away last year. And I said, I'm going to go away because there's so much noise. And I said, I need to tune back into what's
Mm-hmm.
going on
Yeah.
in here. And for that, I need to disconnect. And I honestly feel like everybody should do that. Everybody should take some
Yes.
time to just
Mm-hmm.
ghost, like go away,
Yeah.
disconnect, and start listening to that signal. It's really faint at the beginning, but then as you settle down and get more comfortable with just being cut off on your own,
Yeah.
that signal becomes louder and becomes all of a sudden it becomes so clear that at the end of it you're like, wait a second, why didn't I hear this before?
Yeah. Because
But
life
that's
is too busy. We're so worried about this,
yes,
that, and the other. And hey, I want the new iPhone or whatever. And so we get very wrapped up in, especially a lot of societies that we live in
right,
modern times, right? And so we're too materialistic, and those that are so wrapped up in it think that it's woo woo nonsense, and that gets beat into
right,
our heads, right? And so, and the rest of us over here going, no, no, no. When you listen, when you learn how to interpret and decode the signs that are the language that makes sense to you from your guides and source and all that, um, that's when it just shifts. And I swear you find an inner depth of happiness that you either didn't even know existed, or you've
right,
at least, the very least, you've forgotten it.
yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful. So, Sabine, I mean, I could sit here and talk to you for the longest time because it's so powerful, but I love to keep these episodes short because we are all busy. So, what is it that you do with people, and how can people find you? Of course, we'll have your links in the show notes as well, but I want people to know a little bit more from you on that.
Okay, so while I was gone the last 11 months, and I only came back like 3 4 weeks ago, 4 weeks now, 4 weeks ago, and I it became really super clear to me that I did not want to start another company like I have in the past, and that I didn't have to, that I could actually stop running, that I was no longer fear driven, that now this chapter of my life is about my absolute joy. And
Mm-hmm.
my joy, as it really came up over the 11 months, was I want to help other people with what I have learned over the last 38 years. And that's my gift. Like all of my struggles, whether it was the homelessness and building all these companies and making them profitable and making money and going through infertility, cancer, a home invasion, like there was so much
Mm-hmm.
I have worked through and I've always come out on top. So there is, for me, there's the lived wisdom, like about life, about how to master the challenges that, we do
Right.
encounter. Everybody does. And then there's the business part where I have learned so much and I know how to make money today. Like, and people always say,
Yeah.
oh, you turn everything to gold. Well, yeah, but I have a gift for certain things and how to look at things and how
Mm-hmm.
to get the big picture of things. And that's what I can help people with. So I now help people with both of these things. And there's two ways to work with me.
Mhm.
One is you go on my website, which is thepowerlifecoach.com, and there's a big yellow button says the vault. And you put your email address in there, so you register for the vault, and it will open up a wealth of tools I have used for myself to manage life, but also to build financial freedom that is aligned with who I truly am. And these tools, I now give them as gifts to anybody to
Love it.
use. And so I have to say, like this became really clear to me that I wanted to make this available to everybody and anybody. So I'm working on that. I'm doing it all myself. Like I'm setting it all up. I'm right because it has to come from me because I'm the one, like it's in
Mhm.
here. So there is only probably like a dozen things on there right now. But by the day, it's growing and I'm
Yeah.
feeding it more of these tools. So go on there, register. You get regular updates if that's what you want, and you can just pick and choose what are you looking for? What do you need help with?
Yeah.
So that's my I somebody called me the other day the Robin Hood of like knowledge because I'm
Yeah.
like,
The
here,
knowledge.
just take it. I
Yeah.
am not interested in creating expensive programs or be an agency for anybody. No, here, use it. And the other way is if somebody really wants like the intense one-on-one with
Mhm.
me to make it really personal, that and you have the money to do that, you can hire me for that. And I
Right.
love, love, love helping people transform
Yes.
and
Hear
gaining new
you.
perspectives and creating the life that they really want and also creating financial freedom for themselves.
I just want to honor you and say how much I love that because that's why I created the free version of Rebel Soul Fuckery, the community, to really be supportive and to give back to people and have others come together
Right.
and give back. But at the same time, be straight up and honest, like, hey, I can work one on one. I do work one on one with people. And
Right.
yeah, it's going to cost a little bit because it is a bigger investment. But that is an exchange of energy. And people need
Right.
to remember that. When you want it bad enough, you find a way to make it happen without having someone twist your arm and try to convince you. We are not the, and I always make the joke about the used car salesman Steve down at the car lot. Poor person, anyone named Steve. I have friends named Steve. Sorry, Steve. But anyway, but it's not that, hey, we got this caddy with 3 good tires for you. It's real stuff. And when you want it and you find someone that you resonate with, that you can tell is authentic and real and willing to be raw and open, that's what it should be about. And I'm so happy that there's so many of us out here doing this work now and making this shift come to life. It's just, I'm excited about it. I don't even have words for it. Really, it's beyond words. So
Yeah, it's beautiful, and it makes me so happy that I can do both,
yeah.
and I really enjoy both of it, and I think we have an obligation. Like once we have come that far, and we like I when I realized that my vision board, all of everything I ever wanted was checked, I fell into
Yeah.
depression, right? Because it was like, and now what? Oh my God, I have nothing left to
Exactly.
do. But
Exactly.
that's when the real joy, the real journey, I think our obligation to serve others really
Mm-hmm.
started. It's almost like the first 50 years I laid a foundation to be
Yes.
able to
Yeah.
do that and now give back in all kinds of different ways, and God, it's amazing. It's
Yes. And I love that you said that too, because that's something I remember just a few years ago when I was in a coaching program and, the kind of a typical question that's often asked. And that's like, yeah, what did you want to be when you were a child? And I'm like, I already achieved the childhood dream and a whole bunch of other stuff. I've checked the boxes, right?
yeah,
And then you sit there and you go, now what? And so you have to find out what that is. And so to be able to give back and to bring, we're so similar and so alike, and to be able to
yeah,
bring back and share the knowledge and the life experience and all this stuff and finding those people because we all have different experiences that resonate with different
yes.
people. And so I think that's such a profound piece to point out. And so I want to again honor you and thank you for being here today
Thank
and
you.
sitting with me and sharing with my community. Yeah, it makes my heart
Such a pleasure.
overflow.
I
Yeah.
mean, you and
So
I could talk for hours, so
I'm like, oh, I gotta wrap up. But
yes, thank
so
you.
Sabine, I think you said it once. Go ahead and tell us again one more time the website, and then of course it'll be in the show notes as well as your social media
Yeah.
links.
It's www.thepowerlifecoach.com.
Thank you. Thank you so much
Thank
again. Thank
you.
you guys for listening. All right, everybody. I'm JC, and we will catch you next time. Oh, and by the way, everybody, go stir up some fuckery.